The night was unusually quiet for Officer Daniels and his two fellow patrolmen, Officer Torres and Officer Blake. They were returning to the station after a long shift, tired but satisfied. Their cruiser rolled slowly through the final blocks of their beat when they received a strange call, an anonymous tip about suspicious activity in an abandoned warehouse outside the city. Thinking it could be nothing, they still turned around and headed toward it. That decision nearly cost them their lives. The moment they entered the dark building, everything changed. The lights flickered, the air grew heavy, and before they could react, masked men ambushed them from the shadows. They were outnumbered. Within minutes, the officers were bound, gagged, and thrown like trash into the back seat of their own police car. Then came the fire. The assailants torched the vehicle and vanished into the night, leaving behind 3 heroes helpless inside a burning steel coffin. Smoke thickened. Flames crawled along the seats. Every breath scorched their lungs. Every second pushed them closer to death. But just when everything seemed lost, a sharp bark shattered the silence. A lone German shepherd named Max, AK-9 left behind at the station, had followed their scent into the darkness. And now, with fire roaring and time slipping away, Max stood between life and death, refusing to let his team die. The burning cruiser screamed like a dying beast beneath the night sky, flames clawing their way up through twisted metal. Inside, the smoke had grown so thick it felt like drowning in darkness. Officer Daniels, his hands tied, face blackened by soot, fought to stay awake, but his thoughts slowed like a dying flame. On either side of him, his brothers in uniform, Torres and Blake, lay unmoving, both bound and gagged, oxygen slipping from their lungs with every desperate moment. Then came that bark, sharp, defiant, alive. Outside, Max skidded to a halt beside the inferno, his padded paws scraping over gravel and scorched earth. The sight before him would have made any other animal freeze. But Max wasn't just any dog. He was trained to protect, built for courage, and he'd tracked his handler through city streets, alleyways, open fields, driven by a scent he could never forget. Now, the men who'd raised him, fed him, trained beside him, were dying in front of him. The smoke hit him like a wave, but Max pushed through it. He leapt onto the front bumper, claws digging into blistering metal. His eyes locked onto Danielle's, and in that second, a silent vow passed between man and dog. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Max jumped down, barking wildly, racing in circles, looking for a way in. Every instinct in his body screamed to act, to tear through the steel in heat and flame. He lunged at the door handles, teeth snapping, but the fire had sealed them shut. Still, he tried again, and again. Inside the vehicle, Daniels heard every sound. Through blurred vision and burning tears, he recognized that bark. A memory flashed. Max as a pup, all ears and clumsy paws, the first time they trained together. Daniels had laughed, tossing him a treat. You'll be my partner one day, he'd said. And now, that partner had found him. Max circled to the rear, and that's when he saw it. A tiny fracture in the back window, cracked from heat. He launched himself upward, slammed his paws into it again, and again until the glass split further. Smoke rushed out. Air rushed in. Daniels coughed, choked, but it was enough to jolt his senses back. Max barked again, sharper this time. Urgent. The field was empty, silent, and distant city lights offered no comfort. But Max had no plans of failing. He sprinted down the dirt path, then stopped, listening. The wind shifted. A scent. Gasoline. Tobacco. Old leather. Someone was near. Max bolted toward it, paws pounding the soil. Within minutes, he found a cabin, aged wood, crooked steps, porch light flickering like it hadn't been changed in years. And there, sitting on a creaky chair, was Walter, retired mechanic, former Marine, and perhaps the only soul awake for miles. Walter squinted into the darkness. What in the devil? Then he saw the German shepherd charging full speed toward him. Max barked with a fury that could tear through heaven. He stopped only long enough to grab Walter's pant leg and pull, backing away toward the road, then sprinting a few feet, then circling back. What is it, boy? Max darted again, this time barking at Walter's truck. The old man stood slowly, Something in the dog's eyes shattered every excuse in his head. He grabbed his coat and toolbox and followed. Max ran like the ground behind him was collapsing. Walter floored the gas pedal, headlights slicing through the blackness. The first thing he saw was smoke, too much of it, too close. Then the fire, then the twisted vehicle. Then Max. The shepherd leapt onto the hood again, barking like a siren, warning death to stay back. Walter's mouth fell open. He dropped from the truck, wrench in hand, eyes wide. Oh no! He ran. Max showed him the cracked window. Walter smashed it fully open with 2 quick strikes. The glass exploded outward. Daniels gasped as oxygen rushed in. Behind him, Blake let out a guttural cough. Walter reached inside, arms burning against the heat, and pulled. Daniels came first, falling limp into grass. Walter climbed in again, dragging Blake's heavier frame through the back. He turned once more, his lungs failing, but Torres was slumped forward, unmoving. Max didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed the fabric of Torres's belt with his jaws, and pulled. Again. Walter turned and saw the dog trying to lift a grown man with sheer will. He rushed to help, yanking Torres's legs as Max held the waist. Together, they brought him out, just as a deep boom shuddered through the car. Flames erupted from the front end, hurling sparks into the night sky. All 4 collapsed onto the dirt, alive. Max sniffed every face, checking breath, checking movement. Daniel stirred. You found us. Max. Walter placed a trembling hand on the dog's back. You're not just AK-9, you're an angel in fur. Paramedics arrived within minutes, alerted by the smoke column that now lit the sky like a signal flare. The field transformed into a flurry of flashing lights, boots stomping, hands working fast. Officers shouted, medics moved. IVs were placed, vitals checked. Amidst it all, Max sat beside the stretcher, refusing to move. He rode in the ambulance with Daniels pressed close, eyes unblinking. When they reached the ER, nurses tried to lead him away. He resisted, growled. Only Daniels' weak hand, gently brushing the shepherd's head, calmed him. Stay, please, stay with me. Max stayed. Hours passed. Surgeries, respirators, blood transfusions. The 3 officers fought their way back from the edge of oblivion, and Max waited. He waited through the quiet, through the noise, through dawn, and into the gray light of morning. No food, no sleep, just patience and loyalty. Word spread. By sunrise, news cameras surrounded the hospital. Reporters scrambled for names, details. Headlines blared across screens. K9 hero saves police officers from fiery trap. Photos of Max's soot-covered face hit the internet. One image, Max standing over the stretcher, staring down protectively, went viral within hours. But none of it mattered to him. He only cared about the door behind which his team was still fighting to breathe. Then, finally, movement. Daniels, eyes bloodshot, bruised, opened them and whispered, "Where is he?" Max stood the second the door opened. Nurses smiled through tears and led him inside. Daniels could barely lift his hand, but he did. Max placed his head gently under it. "You did it, you crazy, brave, perfect dog." He licked Daniels' fingers once, then lay beside him and slept for the first time in 36 hours. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic, hope, and hardtache. Machines beeped steadily, each sound more reassuring than the last. Outside, gray clouds rolled across the morning sky, and inside, Daniel stirred again, still weak but aware. Max remained curled beneath his bed, a silent guardian who had yet to sleep properly since the rescue. The doctors were astonished. "He won't eat, won't rest," one nurse whispered, gently scratching behind Max's ear. "It's like he knows they're not out of danger yet." She was right. To Max, this wasn't over. Daniels might have regained consciousness, but Blake was still on oxygen, his lungs raw from the fire. Torres hadn't spoken since being revived. Max made his rounds, checking each of them in turn, pressing his cold nose gently against their hands, laying his head on their chest like a living heartbeat monitor. Back at the police station, an eerie quiet had settled. Desks sat empty. Radios buzzed with routine updates, but the usual chatter was gone. Everyone was talking about what had happened, but more than that, they were feeling it. Officers who'd once seen Max as just another K-9 now walked by his kennel in silence, some even leaving little treats near the bars. But the kennel was empty. Max hadn't returned. Captain Rodriguez stood in front of the force that afternoon and addressed them all. I've seen bravery before. I've buried friends, saluted coffins. But what that dog did out there wasn't just instinct. It was something deeper, something human. He paused, holding back tears. Those men should be dead. We know that. We all know that. But because of Max, they're not. Because of him, 3 families still have fathers. 3 mothers didn't have to bury their sons. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Back at the hospital, Max finally slept, only because Daniels had managed to whisper, "Rest now, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." That night, the hospital received a special visitor, a child, maybe 10 years old, who had survived a house fire a year prior, walked in with his mother. He had heard about Max from the news. He wanted to meet the dog that beat the fire. Max sat calmly as the boy approached, then leaned into him softly. The child hugged him tight, burying his face into Max's neck. "He's not just a police dog," the boy said. "He's a hero dog." Max licked his cheek once, then returned to Danielle's side. The boy's mother cried quietly behind him. "This dog gave my son something I couldn't," she told a nurse. "He gave him courage again." By the end of the week, Blake was sitting up, asking for updates. Torres had spoken his first words. "Max, where is he?" Every time a doctor or a nurse tried to lead Max away from the ICU, he resisted. He had chosen his post. He wasn't leaving. On the 7th day, Daniels was moved to a regular room. When he saw the sunlight for the first time through the window, he called Max to him. "I want to walk," he whispered. The nurses shook their heads. "Not yet. Too early." Daniels locked eyes with Max. "He walked through fire to save me. I can at least try." They helped him stand. Max stood beside him, close enough that Daniels could place his hand on the shepherd's back for balance. Together, they took 3 trembling steps. The hospital staff watched in awe. Max walked slowly, carefully matching Danielle's shaky pace. It wasn't just physical support. It was emotional. It was symbolic. Every inch forward felt like a mile earned. Outside, the media waited. Reporters with cameras. Journalists with notepads. People with signs that read, "Thank you, Max." Real heroes have 4 legs. Max the miracle dog. Daniels hated the spotlight, but he understood its power. When he finally appeared at the entrance of the hospital, in a wheelchair with Max sitting proudly beside him, the crowd erupted into applause. Flashbulbs popped. Cameras rolled. Daniels leaned forward and said only one thing into the microphone. "I survived because he refused to leave." That single line was played on every major channel for the next 48 hours. The governor's office sent a commendation. The police department started a fundraising campaign in Max's name, funds to support retired K-9S and dogs in service who were injured on duty. Within 2 days, it crossed $250,000. Donations poured in from around the world. Even Hollywood called. A film company offered to option Max's story. Daniels refused the money but allowed them the rights, with one condition, that all profits go to K-9 rescue organizations. "Max didn't save us for fame," he told them. "He did it because that's who he is." Later that night, the department threw a private ceremony. All officers, active and retired, were present. 3 empty chairs sat in the front row, symbolizing the lives that were nearly lost. And beside them, a 4th seat with a golden cushion. For Max. When Daniels, now in a suit, walked up to the podium with Max trotting beside him, the room went silent. He took a long breath. There are moments in life when everything changes. Moments when you look death in the face and it blinks first, not because you're stronger, but because something refuses to let go of you. He placed his hand on Max's back. This dog didn't just drag us out of a car. He dragged us back to life. And not just us, he reminded this entire town what loyalty really means. Max barked once. Loud, proud, Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a small box. He opened it to reveal a custom polished medal, engraved with Max's badge number and the words, "For unmatched valor and devotion in the line of duty." He placed it gently around Max's neck. The entire room stood in applause. And Max? He didn't react like a celebrity. He simply turned his head toward Daniels and wagged his tail just once, because all he ever wanted was to protect a man who called him partner. That night, Daniels sat alone on his porch, the moon hanging low, a soft breeze drifting through the trees. Max lay beside him, his head resting on Daniels' foot. "You know," Daniels whispered, stroking Max's fur, "when I got the call to check that warehouse, I thought it was just routine." Max lifted his head. "I didn't know it was going to be the worst night of my life. And the most important one, too." Max pressed against him. Daniels looked up at the stars. "There's a reason you made it to us in time. Maybe fate doesn't speak in words. Maybe it speaks in barks." He laughed softly. Max licked his hand. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by crickets and memories, a man and a dog sat together, scarred, healing, bonded beyond blood, not just by survival, but by love. The following weeks unfolded slowly, like the world was trying to find its rhythm again after holding its breath too long. Daniels, Blake, and Torres were released from the hospital one by one. Their bodies were healing, but their minds had changed. Something about almost dying and being saved by someone who couldn't even speak left a mark that words could never reach. Max returned to the station not as just a K-9 unit, but as a legend. The chief made official. Max would never work another patrol again. Not because he couldn't, but because he'd already done more than anyone could ask. He was retired with full honors. But Max didn't seem to care about medals or parades. All he wanted was to follow Daniels from room to room, tail swaying softly, ears twitching at the smallest sound. They now shared every moment. Sunrise coffee on the porch, rehab walks through the yard, nights spent lying under the stars without speaking. A silent understanding had grown between them, deeper than any command or signal. Daniels no longer saw Max as a dog. He saw him as a soul that stepped into hell and refused to leave him behind. Torres, once the station's joker, became quieter after the fire. He'd sit for hours watching Max nap by Danielle's side, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "That dog," he'd whisper. "He really pulled us out." Blake, too, had changed. More thoughtful, more patient. He started volunteering at the local animal shelter twice a week. "I owe my life to one," he told the shelter director. "Helping more like him feels like the least I can do." And then there was Walter, the retired mechanic, who had once lived in silence with only his memories of war, suddenly became a town hero. But he always redirected the attention. "I just turned the wrench," he'd say. That dog lit the way. He and Daniel became close friends, bound not by age or rank, but by survival and shared courage. Walter often brought treats for Max during their porch visits, which Max accepted with a wag and a grateful lick. Soon, Max's story traveled beyond the borders of the small town. An artist in New York sculpted a bronze statue of him, mid-bark, chest out, eyes fierce. It was unveiled in front of the police station, with a plaque that read, "To those who run into fire, even when they're covered in fur." School children would pass it daily, stopping to place drawings, thank you letters, and even stuffed toys at its base. Parents would whisper to their kids, "That's Max, the dog who saved 3 men with nothing but his courage." One little girl placed a single sunflower beside the statue and left a note, "You make me believe in heroes again." At night, Daniels often sat in front of it, Max by his side, both watching the world move around them. "I used to think I wore this badge to protect others," Daniels told Max softly. "But I think maybe you wore yours to protect me." Max would rest his head on Danielle's boot and sigh. There were still nightmares, flashes of fire, the choking darkness, the terror of helplessness. But Max was always there, nudging Daniels awake, grounding him in reality. And slowly those dreams faded. One spring morning, Daniel stood in front of a group of young cadets at the police academy. He wasn't scheduled to speak, but the commander had asked for something special. something those recruits would never forget. Daniels brought Max with him. He didn't give a lecture. He just told a story about a night when everything went wrong, about how strength didn't come from uniforms or guns, but from loyalty, love, and a bark that refused to be silenced. When he finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then one cadet raised her hand. "Sir, what did Max teach you that the Academy never could?" Daniel smiled, eyes misty. "That real courage doesn't chase glory. It chases you down when you've already given up, bites into your fear, and drags you back to life." Max, sitting quietly by his side, barked once, as if to say, "Exactly." Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. The town changed, new officers came in, fresh faces patrolled the streets, and technology advanced. But one name remained etched into every heart. Max. He aged gracefully. His muzzle grayed, his stride slowed, but his spirit remained unshaken. Even in retirement, Max remained Danielle's shadow. Every morning began with the same routine. Coffee on the porch, a quiet gaze toward the horizon, and Max lying beside him, calm, loyal, unbothered by time. But even heroes have limits. One cold winter morning, Max didn't rise from his bed. Daniels called his name gently. Then again, voice cracking. Max opened his eyes, lifted his head with effort, and wagged his tail, slow, weak, but full of meaning. Daniels knelt beside him, eyes brimming. He placed his hand on Max's chest. "It's okay, partner," he whispered. "You've done more than anyone ever could." Max nuzzled into his hand, then closed his eyes one last time. That day, the entire town went silent. Flags lowered to half-mast. At the station, officers wore black bands over their badges. Some cried openly. Others placed flowers at the foot of his statue. Children who had once drawn pictures of him now left letters that simply said, "Thank you." And at the cemetery, 3 officers, Daniels, Blake, and Torres, stood in full dress uniform beside a wooden box. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the field. A small brass plaque read, "Max, partner, protector, brother, 2016 to 2029. Daniel stepped forward and placed Max's badge inside the box. He tried to speak. His lips trembled. He saved us when no one else could. And he stayed long after the danger passed. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Then, voice breaking, he added, "He was never just a dog. He was the part of us that never gave up." As taps played softly in the wind, Max was laid to rest with honor, with love, with legacy. His duty was done, but his story would never die.